Hello and welcome to Real to Real. I do hope you're staying warm. This past week we celebrated Martin Luther King Day. A little known fact is that Dr. King spent time in Simsbury, Connecticut, long before he became a world-renowned civil rights icon. Deacon Art Miller, a deacon at St. Mary Parish in Simsbury, sat down with Steve Kiltonic and spoke about King's formative summers in Connecticut, as well as his own life journey and struggle battling racism.
14 miles west of Hartford is the town of Simsbury, Connecticut. Its quaint, charming downtown features historic homes and fine restaurants that make it a quintessential New England community, while its farms and open spaces harkens back to its agricultural roots, which includes tobacco. In the 1940s, a visitor from Georgia spent 2 summers here as a farmhand picking tobacco. The experience was life-changing for a 15-year-old freshman from Morehouse College, who became the legendary orator, Nobel Peace Prize winner, and civil rights icon Martin Luther King Jr. Art Miller has served as the deacon at St. Mary's Parish in Simsbury for the past 14 years. Deacon Miller shared his thoughts on the town's little-known connection to King and reflected on his own experience with racism growing up in Chicago. In 1944, World War II was still raging, and there was a serious labor shortage to work the tobacco fields. In the summer of '44, King was an incoming freshman among a group of 100 Morehouse College students recruited by tobacco growers to work in the Simsbury fields while earning money for tuition. The trip north was King's first exposure to life outside of the segregated South.
Now, there was certainly racism, but there was desegregation. He could go into places that he never could imagine he could go into.
Students lived in dorms near the tobacco fields. Each earned about $4 a day working under the nets in stifling 100-degree temperatures.
He was able to go and have a malt at a drugstore. He could go to church and not have to, go into the same church as white folks. He could talk to white people and not have to call them sir or ma'am.
King watched movies at Eno Memorial Hall, played baseball with the locals, and was the only black who sang in the first Congregational Church choir. King was elected as the spiritual leader of his group, despite being the youngest member. He later recalled the summer of '44 as the turning point that led him to join the ministry. King returned again in the summer of 1947 prior to his senior year. In his application to enter Crozier Theological Seminary, he wrote,
"I felt an inescapable urge to serve society. In short, I felt a sense of responsibility which I could not escape."
Historians point to King's formative summers as making a lasting impression, which helped shape his worldview and later his chosen path as a civil rights crusader. In 2021, a memorial was dedicated to King here in front of the Simsbury Free Library. It features 5 panels, each of which commemorate a different aspect of King's life, including his pivotal summers in town. The memorial was created by Simsbury High School students to keep King's dream alive. Deacon Miller spoke at the dedication.
One cannot believe what can happen if one can dream large enough.
Miller's family, which has remained Catholic for generations, moved from Louisiana as part of the Great Migration. Miller lived in Chicago with his 4 siblings during the 1950s and 60s, which were pivotal years in the civil rights movement. Although Chicago wasn't the Jim Crow South, segregation was part of Miller's life.
We had our own grocery stores, milk companies, ice cream companies, insurance companies. Everything we needed existed within the black community on the south side of Chicago.
A turning point for Miller's neighborhood and the country occurred in 1955.
A young boy I went to school with, in fact, sat next to one of my brothers in Chicago. His name was Emmett Till.
10-year-old Art was a friend of Till.
He was my brother's protected. And because he was bigger, my brother was small.
While visiting relatives, Till was abducted, tortured, and brutally lynched by 2 white men at the age of 14 after being accused of offending a white woman in her family's store. His death was one of the catalysts for the modern civil rights movement.
What could Emmett Till have done? You see, hatred kills all futures. Hatred kills good. Emmett Till could have cured cancer. We'll never know.
In 2005, Miller wrote a book on Till's murder from the perspective of his neighborhood friends. In 1957, Miller's family moved into a house in an integrated Chicago community. Deacon Miller recalls that first Sunday as a young boy walking with his mother and brothers to an all-white Catholic church.
What I discovered was that the priest had not wanted the new black parishioners, the new black Catholics, to come to his parish. And he said that from the altar. And it infuriated my mother. And she decided at that moment to begin going to daily mass and sat in the front pew. She fought to be Catholic. She didn't run away from it because she understood it was her church.
His mother's courageous stand left an indelible mark on young Art.
I have never been discriminated against because I'm black. Never been treated poorly because I'm black. Truly treated poorly because the people who do it are broken. God created me to be this, frankly, beautiful black man. So if someone doesn't like what God created, they're criticizing God, not me.
Miller's first act of civil disobedience occurred in 1963 as a 17-year-old high school senior. It was known as Freedom Day. 250,000 Chicagoans assembled to protest the segregationist policies in the public schools. Miller sat down in the middle of the street and was arrested.
I remember singing "We Shall Overcome," and we were sitting in the street, linked arm to arm, and police dogs barking and people yelling and screaming.
Deacon Miller says when he gives talks on injustice, he speaks of the 11th commandment.
We can't be silent, because when you're silent, you're a participant in whatever was wrong. And so, my thought was, then that's the 11th commandment. Thou shalt not be a bystander.
Miller says the ghost of hate always lurks in the shadows.
Now, in the church and in the community, I'm safe, I'm comfortable. I'm no longer the black deacon, I'm the deacon. But when I walk out of here, I'm the black deacon or the black man. There is this ghost that always speaks to me, be careful, be careful, be careful. And every black person in America thinks the same thing.
Deacon Miller is a nationally known preacher who brings his own personal life stories of racism to public forums, universities, and St. Michael's Cathedral, shown here in 2022. A day before Martin Luther King's holiday, Deacon Miller's inspirational homily echoed the civil rights leader's vision.
But that bullet could not stop the beauty of his vision. His vision of peace and hope remains. You see, hope can never die. Hope is eternal. Hope is forever. One day, we shall overcome.
Deacon Art Miller vows to continue fighting for equality and justice until Martin Luther King's dream is fulfilled. For Real to Real, I'm Steve Kiltonick.